Hi, everybody. I'm Shayma Altrikawi. I am the Patient Engagement and Clinical Program Manager at Citrin Foundation. And I'm here with Carson today, who is one of our members. He is a person who is living with citrin deficiency. And essentially what we're going to be talking about is going to be a sort of short interview style conversation, touching on sort of themes of identity, and sort of other challenges that he's had within his experience. So yeah. Hello, Carson.
Hello.
So do you want to start off by telling our viewers, I guess, a little bit about yourself, your name, and a little bit about sort of managing your condition?
My name is Carson Kawabata. I'm a 18-year-old senior in high school in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States. I also go to a pretty small school, so I think that's played a big part in how I've been able to manage my condition. At my school, I've been lucky enough to do and to compete in high school golf for my last 4 years. And I think it's been a really cool experience to build that collectivity as a team and still compete, even though we're not, the best, but it's still a really good experience, I think. Outside of school, I also do martial arts. I'm a fourth degree black belt in Taekwondo. I've been doing it for 10 years, and now that I've been doing it for a really long time and don't get to train as much, I have become more of a teacher. So those are just a couple of things I've done as extracurriculars outside of school. And I think all my extracurriculars in school have really helped me build my foundation for managing my condition. Because like I briefly mentioned earlier, I go to a pretty small school. My graduating class size is 72 kids. So I've been really lucky to have teachers every year who are aware to some degree of my deficiency, where in a public school setting, it'd be really hard for teachers to be able to accommodate to me. So I think that's been really vital in my ability to, have these experiences of managing my condition. So with that said, I would say overall, a big part in helping me be set up for success is having my support system. Because to be honest, I think a big part is I wasn't diagnosed with citrin deficiency until I was 6 years old. I mean, regardless if I was diagnosed with citrin deficiency or not, we didn't really know what to do exactly. And it was also just like doctors were had a difficult time diagnosing me. So for the most part, it was just kind of experimenting a little bit. But to be honest, I wasn't really aware of this kind of experimental period. It was kind of just my family allowing me to listen to my body, reflecting back 18 years later. Because a big part, like I said, I think a big part is my family. I was raised by my great grandmother a lot before I was diagnosed. So she helped me learn when I needed to eat and how much. Before I could talk, she learned this the unfortunate way when I would scream at her. And so after, a few times, she would have like a routine, right? Her routine would be to have before I could eat whole food, have my milk ready like 30 minutes before I would scream usually. So that routine has carried through my whole life. Because to this day, one of my routines, especially with school, is I have a protein shake about every 2 hours. Because, just to give you like a general idea of my school day, every class is about an hour and 15. And from 8 to about 11 o'clock, I just have classes. There's not really any time to have like a big lunch. So like I said, those protein shakes are really helpful because between that 3 hours, it's really hard to do a big lunch, you know? So these protein shakes have been really helpful in my routine that I've been talking about. Something I haven't mentioned as much is another extracurricular activity I do is golf. And you can imagine as I got better at golf, I started playing longer. So I went from playing maybe like 2 hours a day to 5 hours a day. So similar to school, a lot longer, right? So
Yeah.
it's hard to transport like sandwiches in my golf bag. So like I said, these protein shakes have been really helpful in being a foundation, especially when I was golfing. That's really what helped me be comfortable with having this routine in high school as I get harder classes and longer classes. So definitely, just to like kind of sum it up, I think my family really set a strong foundation. And to be honest with you, it hasn't really felt a lot like I'm managing my condition. It was a lot my parents, my grandparents giving me the tools, and then I feel like I'll be a lot more successful once I start feeling like I'm managing my condition. So
Yeah,
I
it
think
sounds like it's been a team effort.
exactly, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And it's really interesting to hear about your routine and, how you've managed things so far. I am curious, at what sort of age do you feel like you kind of had an understanding of your condition? I can't remember, when was it that you said you were diagnosed? At what age?
I was diagnosed at 6 years old.
6 years old. So yeah, when do you feel like you kind of got to a point that you understood what was going on with you?
So I mean, like I said, one thing I kind of forgot about was when I was 2 to 3, I wasn't growing, so I missed out on a very big growth stage. So that leads to one of the things I struggled with when I was younger was height. I didn't necessarily direct or translate that with my deficiency, but I guess to some degree you could say I think I understood that I was shorter because of my deficiency. I didn't exactly understand it, but I think to some degree I did.
Yeah.
So that's for the most part what I correlated my deficiency with when I was younger. When I got older, I had this like free science research project that my school gave me, or gave all the students, and I decided to look into my deficiency. And that's when my mom bought your guys' book. I was able to read through it a little bit, and quite frankly, I didn't understand it very well still, but I think it was a good step in the right direction for me to understand a little bit more on like, the basics of it as an eighth grader. Yeah. And then I've understood a little bit more of like the emotional side of it. What I'm getting at is, when I was younger, I struggled with. So one of the things my family has used as a term is low protein, which is when I go too long without having food. So when I get to this stage, I get really lethargic, and you can imagine, especially as a shy kid, it was hard for me to vocalize when I was low on protein. The problem with this, though, is especially when I got older, and I still struggled a little bit with managing myself when I get too low, I started to understand a little bit that when I got low on protein, my judgment started getting loose, I guess you could say. So looking back, I really wanted to focus on managing myself before I get to that point, because I've had a lot of lows, to be honest, when I was low on protein. Now, I don't want to sound like I've had my low points only because of my protein deficiency. And when I get low on protein, that is not true. But it definitely became hard to define when I was low on protein and when, like, say, I was anxious, because to be honest with you, the more I became low on protein, the more those blurred.
Yeah.
So, like I said, as I've become to understand my protein deficiency on more of a emotional side, I think I've become a lot more aware, because even though I still do get low on protein as an adult, I definitely feel less like that anxious feeling of, you know, am I gonna mess up? Because, like I said, one of the things I struggled with on the golf course was not only did my protein levels affect the way I played, but I also had a tendency to lie about my golf score. And that's just a natural thing with golf, but I especially had a hard time just because my focus was really low. Just overall, I would say I just had a hard time of being vulnerable when I was low on protein. And I think you could argue some of it rooted because, like I said, as a shy kid growing up, it was hard for my parents and my grandparents to tell when I was low on protein, because at that point I wasn't screaming at them to feed me, So when I started to be able to talk, at least, it was very much of like an observation thing where, like I said, even though I didn't talk, I was observably like low. Like sometimes I couldn't even support my body. I kind of like crash, Definitely my understanding for the majority of my life of my deficiency has been like observation of and just overall reflection.
Yeah. I mean, you've touched on a lot of different aspects of your experience there. How do you feel that growing up with citrin deficiency sort of affected your relationships, or your upbringing, I guess, like your experience of growing up? Because having a rare disease, is a very unique experience in itself. And then having citrin deficiency specifically is also a very unique experience within that. How do you feel that, like, what role do you think that played in how you grew up?
Like I said, a lot of my time in elementary school, I correlated citrin deficiency to my height. So I think to some degree, because a lot of my classmates were taller than me, I think to some degree you could say that was one of the reasons why I was shy. But I mean, overall, I think I was just a shy kid, regardless of my height. But, and like I said, to be honest with you, even when I did know I had citrin deficiency, I didn't really grapple with the idea that I had a rare disorder, to be honest with you. With factors like my doctors not knowing what I had for 6 years wasn't really something that crossed my mind, to be honest. So, like I said, a big role with my citrin deficiency has been my family. So, I mean, I think regardless of my citrin deficiency, to be honest, they've been supportive of me, not because they think I need more help. They just want to be supportive. Just because they're family, there's not really a more reason why they want to help. These supportive relationships, and with that said, also I I wasn't really aware of how supportive my family was.
Mm.
As simple as my great grandmother setting my foundation for me when I was younger and screaming at her, to the point I know when I need to have protein in my body. As simple as things as that have helped me create stronger relationships now. Because, like I touched on a little bit before, when I get low on protein, one of the things, especially when I got older, that started signaling my family, and especially when my sister was born, I became a little bit more argumentative. Not too much still, but it was just my sister, especially as we were younger, we would argue a lot, and it happened a lot when we were younger. So when she started talking, I started talking. It was kind of just this bad thing that wouldn't stop until we had food in our body. So with that said, something big in my life that I feel like has affected my relationships, especially when I'm low on protein, is my ability to think on the fly. When I was in like middle school, especially, I built this paranoia of messing up when I'm low on protein. So that triggered my fight or flight a lot more. Yeah. I started saying things and not thinking about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think one of my biggest examples is in 7th grade, made it harder for myself. And to be honest with you, at the moment, I thought I was making it easier for myself by showing the teacher that I was normal, that I could read a book in a week like everyone else could, or at least I thought like everyone else could. But ultimately, experiences like that initially hurt my relationships with my teachers. And I think after making a couple mistakes like that, it kind of turned me off in terms of creating those relationships with my teachers. But as I got older and started to understand the reasons I lied and starting to take ownership of my lies, because one of the things I forgot to mention was part of my issues with my relationships with like my teachers was I don't think I could take ownership for my actions, which was a big part also of why I wanted to push myself to minimize my low protein, was because I had a hard time saying I did a certain thing, but it doesn't matter because I was low on protein. That was something I struggled with for quite a long time. So I think that also affected my relationships with my teachers. So I think as I've gotten better at taking ownership of my actions, even when I'm low on protein, has really helped me overall staying connected with myself and others.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it sounds like, some challenges have come up along the way, but it sounds like you've, kind of really tackled them head on. I mean, a couple of things came up there that made me think about the theme of identity. You were talking about like this sense of paranoia, and your achievements. And I guess to some extent in my mind, that is coupled with, the worrying about how other people view you. And I guess you kind of mentioned earlier about sort of, like lying about your golf score, and things like that. And they all kind of tie back into identity for me. So I was wondering, if there are any specific things that you feel, your condition, and living with your condition has sort of affected your perception of your identity.
I think something I kind of forgot to mention was I think I did understand my disorder being rare, but it was only a number to me, because I think I knew in elementary school that it was diagnosed in like 1 in 250,000 or something. So I just want to say, like, I think to some degree, I actually did understand that a rare disorder, especially, I mean, in elementary school, at least. I don't think I knew that number before elementary school. Something I've been thinking about a little bit in terms of identity is I've been thinking about the bigger picture of just disorders in general. It's interesting because I'm reading this book about a deaf community, and it had me thinking I've never been addressed as a citrin deficient person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that plays a big role in identity. I'm still grappling with it, so I don't have much more to say past that. But I think it's just something interesting to think about. If anything, the only thing I've been addressed as this is a metabolic patient. It's never even been like a citrin deficient patient. What especially challenged me was, like I mentioned briefly before, was when I was low on protein. And looking back now, it was hard for me to say I did it. I lied. It was hard to say that. It was more of a I did it because I was low on protein. So there's this kind of distance I created between my quote unquote normal self and when I'm low on protein. So I think to some degree that challenged my identity a little bit. And it's honestly hard to say how much my deficiency played in this role and how much COVID played in this role. Because I especially started thinking about my identity when COVID happened. I don't want to make it sound like I'm blaming the quarantine at all, but it's just hard not to think about it when you literally have nothing else to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people share that experience.
So I would just say overall, one of the things I discovered about identity as an overall was it's hard to create identity without your community, which has been a big theme for me. Not only has my family been an awesome community for me, but like my martial arts school, it's been something I haven't really talked about, but like I mentioned, it's been something I've been doing for 10 years. And it was especially something I did a lot when I was in elementary school. But as middle school progressed, I went less and less and less. And then COVID hit around when I started going like once a month and maybe not even once a month. So it kind of progressively went from, I used to go 2 hours a day, every day. And then middle school was, like I said, maybe every other month, once a month. And then COVID, obviously I couldn't go at all. A big part of my identity that I haven't really touched on is myself as a martial artist. And myself as a martial artist has really helped me with understanding myself as a person with citrin deficiency. Because one of the biggest things that I've learned as a martial artist is balance. Like I was saying, even ironically with school and martial arts, that balance was really off because it was just school, maybe taekwondo, and then so on. With that balance that I wanted to maintain, I then realized what martial arts has done for me, not only as a citrin deficient or a person with citrin deficiency, but also just as a person who, for example, like in my martial arts, balance gets talked a lot of when thinking about how do you balance improving yourself, but also liking who you are right now? That's a really big thing, regardless of if you have a disorder or whatever it is. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
I think that's something I really struggled with. Like I said, in 7th grade, I wanted to be like everyone else. And I kind of created this everyone else who could read a book in a week. But that is the complete opposite of the philosophy that I've learned now, where I've learned to accept that maybe I am a slower reader than a lot of other people. But as long as I can understand the book in the way that I can, then there's no need for comparison to other people.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I feel more confident in what I can bring to the table. And I think that's a result of being able to just overall take ownership of my actions more.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of insight there. A lot of insight. So thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I guess what I'm hearing is that, your experience and, even yourself, your identity is kind of created by all of these different things. So it's created by your community, it's affected by your lived experience of having citrin deficiency, but it's also affected by, like you said, this finding this balance and liking yourself, but also pushing yourself. And I mean, I think it's a it's a balance I'm still figuring out. I think a lot of people, really grapple with that. It seems almost like it's just like a constant sort of work in progress. But it seems like you have a really amazing support system and that you've kind of chosen, certain sort of extracurricular activities and certain things that can kind of help you build yourself up in a way that you want to grow. Both sort of despite some of, I guess, like the experience of having, citrin deficiency, despite the sort of energy deficits and things like that. And, finding ways of managing the conditions that you can do the things that you want and kind of grow into the person that you want to be. I find it really interesting, the sort of grappling with, how much you want to sort of ascribe to the deficiency. So, you were saying like, when I'm low in protein, then I can kind of, be a certain way. And it was easy to sort of blame the deficiency rather than take ownership of those things. And like you said, it's all about balance, right? There's this sort of, you have to have a level of understanding for yourself and compassion for yourself about, how the disease affects you. But also, kind of taking ownership for things as well. And I think that that's like really impressive. And that's a very difficult thing to do for anyone, really.
I think, and I don't want to make it sound like it was like this big thing, but a big test to me looking back is I was recently invited to a leadership camp through a program I volunteer for called First Tee. It's a golf program. And just the overall sense I got from the camp is these amazing teenagers from all over the US. And it's 20 of them too, so it's not very many. And I think it was out of like a couple hundred or something like that.
Wow.
So I don't want to say I was paranoid because of that, but I think there was a little bit of a test for me looking back. In the moment, I didn't really feel like it was a test, but looking back, I kind of think of it as a test to myself because this was a pressure that I think I put on myself when I was going to middle school, because like I said, growing up, or I didn't really mention this, but as a shy kid, I didn't really make a lot of friends when I was in lower school or elementary school. So I think to some degree you could say that built upon some insecurities.
Yeah.
So I think I put a little bit of pressure on myself when in middle school at the beginning. I actually made a lot of friends, but I still think to some degree I put that pressure on myself to the point where it didn't feel authentic. So with that said, when I went to or when I was preparing for this camp and when I went there, like I said, I had this idea that, there's these amazing people who've done so many things. And to be honest with you, it didn't feel like I had to add on things to myself to be on their level. Because at the end of the day, what I've learned is just because they're amazing at their level doesn't mean I have to be at their level right now. So I think that setting that was put in was a great opportunity for me to see if I would go back to the same mistake I made when I went to middle school, which was feel pressured about myself, others, because I have a rare disorder or I'm not good at making friends, whatever it is. Am I going to make the same mistake? And I didn't. I think it was because also these people are very unique in that they are very good at what they do, but they're the same age as me. They're supportive. And it's just been, I think also I'm used to a bit more of a, like, not strict environment per se, but in an environment where you're pushed, but like I said, in a supportive way. They're not like pushing me to the point where I'm going to break or whatever. So I think that was, looking back, one of my biggest tests to myself of if I really am connected with myself. Because like I said, this was a little bit different because like I said, I think I put a little bit of an unrealistic pressure on myself going to middle school. But I think going here, I was even shocked even more when I heard about what these people have done. And like I said, they're my age. So it's just crazy. But I think to some degree also because they're my age, it doesn't feel as unfeasible. Yeah. So I think that was one of my biggest tests to myself as I was getting better at understanding myself as a person and a patient.
It sounds like that was a really good opportunity for you. Yeah, I mean, I think, the comparison thing is very easy to do. It's a very sort of natural human tendency. But I think, what you said is really great, which is that you found it inspiring. It was no longer this you putting pressure on yourself to be like them. It was more like, oh, it's super impressive that people my age have done these things. Instead of being like, oh, I have to be exactly where they are. And I think that's really great. I definitely wish I had some of this insight at your age. I think it'll be really helpful for, other teenagers to hear about your experience, to be honest. So with that, if you do have any sort of like a final piece of advice, anyone who is going through similar challenges, other teenagers with citrin deficiency, what would you like to say to them before we sort of wrap things up?
I think some advice would be, don't try to prevent things from happening. Because one thing I struggled with a little bit was someone told me things happen for a reason. And that kind of messed me up a little bit. Because, with that said, that was kind of something that started when I was thinking about why was I I'm not trying to get religious or anything, but like, why was I given citrin deficiency? You know,
Yeah.
why was I the 1 in 250,000? The point I'm making is I wouldn't be as strong as I am without my experiences.
Yeah.
If you take out the times I lied, if you take out the times I was low on protein, even, I can tell you 100% I would not be as strong as I am today. So let things happen as they happen. And I think that's part of the reason why I struggled with that was one of the things I struggled with was instant gratification. And I think that's something a lot of us struggle with, especially with technology, you know? So like I said, you could even look at like golf, for example. An easy way to be a good golfer is to just write down that you shot a really good score that day. But ultimately, did you really score, or did you just write down what you want to be? So I think just that, you know, struggle with instant gratification a little bit. And quite frankly, I still do. I'm not saying I've mastered I can't say 100% that I still like instant gratification, but I understand more about accepting the struggle, accepting the success I have and everything in between. So, I mean, kind of going back to what I was saying before, trying to let things happen, because I think ultimately that shows that you have trust in yourself. And that was hard for me. I think the reason why I felt I need to lie and whatnot was because I didn't trust myself. Now I might still lie. I might have still lied even if I had more trust in myself, but trusting the process and quite frankly, what helped me with my trust in myself was, like I said, my foundation, my family, my community. Because ultimately, I really think my identity, I wouldn't feel that sense of identity if I was just the same person every day. What pushes me to be better and have different perspectives is the different people I meet. Because at the end of the day, like I said, with COVID, and not going to things like martial arts, I didn't get to have those empowering moments. And, you know, as simple as my instructor giving talks about, you know, the philosophies I talked a little bit about before, just even those perspectives are what helped me with my sense of identity, is not being fixed, but accepting the process, you know?
Yeah. That's super powerful. I loved what you said about sort of identity being this almost like changing thing that you wouldn't be who you are if you were just the same person every day. I mean, it's like you said, it's kind of a process. And, you know, it kind of just makes me think that like identity is much less about who you are in the sense of like putting yourself in a box. Like, I'm a person with citrin deficiency and I am, you know, I do martial arts. It's more about like less about who you are and more about how you live your life every day. Like, that is what shapes who you are. It's not this person that you can kind of like write down on paper and tick boxes. You know, like, I'm a person who can read a book in a week and all that. And I think that that's a super, super powerful message to give. And I think that it's, incredible that you have such a strong community around you that's really helped you to, form this trust in yourself. And, part of why I really wanted to do this interview is that I think that you also have the capability of helping other people build that trust in themselves as well. Especially given, it is a rare condition, and, a lot of people haven't actually met anyone else who is going through the same challenges. And so I feel like that's a good note to kind of end this on, is that, I think your experience is really incredible. And I'm looking forward to sort of, people, both parents and, kids kind of benefiting from this and kind of learning to, I guess, trust themselves and trust the process that they're kind of going through. So I want to say thank you very much. And we'll end it there.